Hello, I'm MKX3Cat, and I built a house in Reforj, and it's just as beautiful as you'd expect from me, because this is 4J Studios' newest game, and today you'll be seeing my survival gameplay with some exploration and the things that this game does seriously right with building, as well as the answers to all of your other questions you have about this, because myself and 6 other YouTubers were invited up to the 4J offices, and we all have our own gameplay, except for Mumbo, who didn't keep his, and gave it to me instead, so I can show you his first house too, I guess. Anyway, Reforj is the name of the new game that 4J have been working on for the last few years, with Stampy having been involved as of this year too. It is currently in a prototype pre-alpha phase, which means it has the bare minimum in it to be showable to anyone. This was the first time they have done that in any public setting, and the content and graphical appearance will substantially be improved before the actual release. And if you're curious as to when that is, well, the release of this game isn't known. I don't know even by 4J. However, they do intend to have some playable version, something that some number of public players can get their hands on, even if it's just a closed beta, sometime in 2025. Anyway, the game and engine for Reforj are in the same genre as Minecraft, as I'm sure you can pick up. However, 4J have built this engine from the ground up to fundamentally solve problems that games like Minecraft have in their design, but on an engine level. An example of this would be that every block can be made into stairs and slabs, but also into new shapes like these curves and diagonal slabs without having to add a new block every single time. This solves two problems. One of those is that you don't have to do huge updates just to add stairs for different blocks, but also it means that your inventory is much less cluttered. Also, this means they can take advantage of their expertise from the console edition with things like hold placing returning, and even the sort of stuff that blew my mind when I first experienced it. Anyway, that's enough of a preamble now. Let's check out my first survival run. Welcome to Reforj. As you can see, that key art that they've been using to promote the game is in fact the current menu screen, and here is me loading up a world on a brand new seed, a brand new world. I use the world seed Toycan in case you're curious, and it spawns me into a desert, and immediately now that I'm in that desert, I can start destroying the blocks, or the voxels as you'd call them in most games. But interestingly enough, the voxels in this game aren't always exactly square. Instead, you can see when I put two side by side here that you can actually get sub-voxels, or you can get these sculpted elements as they call them in their actual parlance. But basically you can get voxels, cubes, that aren't exactly cubes. You can get cubes that are triangular, or get cubes that are shaped in different ways, and this means that you have a terrain that is entirely made up of blocks but looks much more natural, as you can see here. One of the other things that's absolutely genius about this game, that again, just the moment you hear it you're like, why isn't this the way it's done elsewhere, is the fact that you get access to the wingsuit very early on. All they said for the end game is that they want to make it early on, but in this preview you can see that you immediately have access to the wingsuit, and given that it's the best form of transportation from any game from Minecraft to Breath of the Wild, having access to it from the go just makes sense for allowing the exploration of your world a little bit easier. Because if, like me, you spawn in a desert, but maybe you want to get over to this lush biome over here, that looks like there's a jungle on the left, and maybe the closest thing to a plains we can see on the right, it's very cool to be able to immediately go and see that. Here you can see there's actually a cave entrance, which is also taking advantage of those weird sculpted blocks, which clearly have so many different angles and variations, but as the player, we're gonna come into that later, you have slightly fewer options available. But first, what are we gonna do in this game? Well, obviously, chop down a tree. Here's something fun. When you chop down the base of a tree, the entire thing will fall. This is one of those features that everyone loves, but it's still cool to just see regardless. I got all of the logs from that tree, and I also got some leaves. I imagine in the future you'll be getting fewer leaves, that's what I heard, but basically I've got some logs now, and if I chop down a second tree, I can get a second type of log. There are lots of types of logs at present, and they can all be used to do all the things that you would expect for them, but yeah, it's very interesting to see that we chop these down using what is currently just our hand in this weird, it looks like we're doing some weird psychic level ability, but yeah, basically the idea is you're going to have a multi-tool very early on. Rather than having to craft tools and have different tools for different jobs, there's just going to be a tool that breaks things or places things, and you'll be able to use that to chop down some trees or to level out any other terrain you find. So I think this is very interesting personally, and I also think it's cool to be able to chop down a tree and not have to go up there and get all the craziness done. I just got my 28 birch logs to go with my 13 oak logs. This means that, yeah, the game as it exists right now has a decent balance in terms of the survival stuff of you don't have to go through as much work as you might otherwise expect, and you don't have to grind for things that we all know you're just going to get done anyway. So now that I've got my trees chopped down, what should I do now is the really fun question here, and obviously the answer is chop down a bigger tree. Here is something fun. It's a tree that takes advantage of these curved elements to make this kind of circular tree trunk. And this is what I was kind of getting at with these sculpted elements. This is why I think the blocks not necessarily always being blocks are genius, is because it allows you to do fun stuff like this. It allows you to make a giant circular tree, or allows you to make these big hills if you want to. For now, they're just what the game's going to have, and I'm going to have to choose my own thing to build. I spent a really long time looking around and trying to decide on that. I chopped down some trees while I was here. I started to sculpt a nice little flat ground, and then something interesting occurred to me, because in this, yeah, again, look at this, by the way, there's a jungle-looking thing over here, but something really interesting occurred to me, and that was, what if I left the game? I was actually talking to Paddy and Chris, so two of the people behind 4J Studios, and then I saw this. Do you know what this is? There is a mini-game menu on the main options, and I thought I wouldn't be too cheeky and check it out, but then I decided, you know what, let's go ahead, let's find out what's in there, and as you can see, there is, in fact, 4 mini-games planned. I don't know if that's for launch or for when that is. There are at least 4 mini-games planned, and the first of these is called Saw, and I'm just saying, I feel like this is very much 4J Studios taking advantage of the fact that people know that they are good for what, you know, they're good at making console ports. This is a great console game. They're good at making well-optimized engines, etc., that run at 60 FPS. That's all great too. But also they're taking advantage of the fact that people know them from mini-games, and Saw sounds an awful lot like another one. If only I could describe what Saw could possibly be like, and so that is fascinating. Apparently, after speaking to Stampy a little bit after this, that mini-game is fully functional right now. They just decided not to show it off at the present time, and that is very interesting if true. Also very interesting if true, here's what the world settings look like. I decided to, this was being previewed on an Xbox Series X if you're curious, and I decided to try something which I was a little curious about, because after realizing you couldn't make a flat world type, and after realizing you couldn't play minigames, I decided to see what would happen if I tried to play online knowing that I was the only person playing, and apparently I managed to crash the game by doing that. And so, fun fact, if you want to see the game loading up from scratch, I don't think you're meant to see this, here is the loading screen to the game. This is proof that I'm literally allowed to show whatever I want from the game. This is proof that I can tell you my true thoughts, and I can say, honestly, I love these loading screens. I'm surprised they didn't show them off at all. But yeah, let's load back into our world, shall we? Which loads up surprisingly fast, in my opinion, and let's now work on building a house. So I decided to just do a little bit of the classic terraforming. I think we all have this flaw inside of ourselves that sometimes you just want to flatten a land. You don't even have a big goal for what should go there instead, but I just wanted to flatten something, and so I did a little bit of that, and afterwards I started building my house out of my birch blocks. And now let me show you something crazy. Did you see that right there? You might not have spotted it, but let's go back a little bit. Watch how I'm building this block. I can place on top of the blocks, even though I'm not, again, I place the block up there, even though I'm down here, because one of the crazy smart things they did at the engine level was make it possible for you to place blocks while you weren't facing the vertex of that block. So this little cube that appears around where you're placing allows you to see exactly where you're going to be placing, and so right here you can see there's some little edges around there which tell me I'm going to be placing on the right. This is expected. You can do this in Minecraft or any other voxel engine. However, I can then do it again, and I can do this again, and I can place blocks that otherwise I wouldn't be able to, such as on the bottom of that block right there. This is really, really cool in its own right, by the way. I'm building the most generic house right now. This is my first house I'm building, so please forgive me. As you can see, I'm going to do a bit of crafting while I'm in there. Crafting is very rudimentary right now. There's very few recipes. Basically, it's just there so you can have torches if you wanted to explore some caves. But then I decide I'm going to use these new resources I've just crafted to make a slightly different wall of this house. I'm going to run out of birch logs if I don't. But look what I do with this birch timber, which we can just call it planks if we're being honest. Look what I do with this birch timber. I place blocks in front of myself, Bedrock placing style, and then I do something that's never been possible on Bedrock, and I decide I want a block under there, and I can just place it. Even though I can't see the bottom of this block, the game knows that if I'm placing just underneath it, I probably don't want that to go nowhere, or rather, I think Minecraft would assume you're trying to face the dirt that's 20 blocks away. No, it assumes that I want to place slightly under the block, and whoa, I don't know why it got real low quality for a second there, but whoa, you can place blocks underneath other blocks, including the block that you're standing on when you're bridging. This is really, really cool in my opinion, and if you are trying to use the game as a block building tool, as let's be honest, that's what a lot of people like to do, the survival aspect is great, but some people just love building things, being able to actually build on the vertexes without having to make scaffolding is a game changer. I decided to play around with this just a little bit more here, again, kind of bedrock bridging, because I really just wanted to show off the fact that you can place blocks under your current one, so here is me doing it right there. Look, I am placing a block under a block that I'm standing on. This shouldn't be a game changer. This shouldn't be, again, it's one of those things where the moment you see it, you're like, why isn't this just the way things work already? But yeah, even as you can see, I'm trying a little bit hard here to really get the precise movement down. I just don't do it. But the fact that you can place underneath where you're standing is a revolution in my opinion. Anyway, so now I'm going to build the back wall, which is going to be from leaves. I have very high quality taste in my builds. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And then I decide to do something fun. This is the crazy thing I was talking about with the idea of every block can be made into stairs and slabs, etc. And so when I finish my house, I built this beautiful dirt roof, I can now decide to make the roof into stairs or into slabs or into this right here, which is the weird curvature tool. You only have, again, in the prototype pre-alpha that I was playing 0.0.0.0.240, in this version, there were only access to about, 6 different shapes, and those shapes could be used on any vertex of a block, so you can see me kind of working out, can I make a curved slope? The answer is right now you can't. There are, the engine demo that I saw last year, they had like 200 sub-voxels or something ridiculous like that, but basically to try and make it easier for the player, you just have access to this 9, which I think actually makes a lot of sense, but again, just that's why I was kind of confused right here, and so yeah, you can use this to do all sorts of fun things. But one of the things that I think everyone has been asking for, that I guess I really should have really clickbaited this video for more, is the fact that you can make something people have been asking for forever. Nope, that's not sloped entrances to a house, that's just me being strange. But instead, you know this back wall I made out of leaves? By using the slab tool on the side, I can make a vertical slab. You heard that correctly, a slab that is now vertical, and so if you want to have the inside of a wall and the outside of a wall be different, you don't have to go through a crazy amount of work, you just use the sub-voxel, or you use the sculpted element, or there's a lot of terms they're using for this. I'm sure the community will just pick their own if I'm being honest, but you can actually shape it your way, which is actually kind of nuts if you ask me. No longer do you have to work out carpets and all that other noise, instead you could just put slabs down there and slabs on your walls, and all blocks can be as big or as small as you want them to be. At this moment, I have to show off the character and say this is something, so I spoke to Echo, and a few other people have some real interesting thoughts about this, and so I want to say very clearly that in this video, it might sound like I'm saying a lot of praise because like, oh, I guess you are just saying that, and so I think you can't give, if you give praise, that can't be seen as genuine or valid without also giving at least 1 or 2 points of critique. One of those seems to be people hate this character. I love it personally. I like the futuristicness of it, but I don't love the fact that, as you can see, the hotbar's kind of getting in the way of the camera view. I don't love the hotbar in general. I don't love the health bar. It all looks very, very early build, and I'm hoping they're going to change it for the final release. And yeah, I also feel like a lot of the textures were a little bit basic, but that's to be expected, right? They're all just here to prove the point. What I did like, on the other hand, were the shadows. Look, as I'm building here, I switch back to first person, you can see the shadows update in real time for the block, and that's not a static shadow. If you pay close attention, you can see that the shadow is actually shifting in real time. The sun is casting shadows on the world, so too does the moon, interestingly enough. But the sun and the moon cast shadows on the world. Look at this, by the way. I'm building underneath the block I'm on. Every time I did this, I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm so excited. This is great. And yeah, the fact that there are dynamic shadows shows that they do have a great gameplay engine sitting under here that's just kind of not showing off. Also, I think at some point I should mention, like, okay, did you know also, so this is my house with a big T outside of it. It's one of the few things that I built. If I could show you around, let me show you that. So here's me looking at my house from a glide perspective, because I decided to fly around my entire world. I decided it would be fun if I could show it. I decided to fly the entire way around it, because one of the fun things that they've done with this world world is they've made it a limited world, but taking advantage, because, you know, I feel like that is a fun way for games to be, personally, but if I'm being honest, I think it's a technological restriction to make sure that they can always have 60 FPS and keep the resolution steady and keep file sizes small. There are limited size worlds that instead, when you reach the edge, instead of getting that weird endless ocean, you loop all the way around. As you can hopefully see now, I've gone all the way around my world and I've ended right back here in the mountain. I did this going the other way because people around me were like, oh, I want to see that again. It blows people's minds the first time they see it because you get the feeling of an infinite world without actually having one, but still, by itself, this sounds more like a limitation than a benefit to most people. I love limited worlds. I love the idea of slowly terraforming the entire thing, making it into my, domain, but I think for a lot of people, they would rather just be able to walk in a direction and endlessly find new terrain, especially with updates, but then they told us about the idea of gateways, and so these, they show them off in the main key art, and you're picturing something like a nether portal, but currently, the way nether portals and end portals work in Minecraft is you have two different portals for two different dimensions, but imagine if this gateway could take you to an infinite number of dimensions. That is the sales pitch for them, and so whenever a new update comes out, you could just go through a normal gateway and experience another normal world, but the idea is meant to be that you customize your gateway, and so if you put, say, 1,000 feathers into it, it will take you into a world that is incredibly sky-based, because all the feathers have lifted up the terrain, and so it's floating islands. Or if you put a bunch of lava or basalt blocks into it, you're going to get a world that is covered in lava. You can go to entirely new worlds through this portal, and those worlds will be entirely different to your own. So instead of just walking 10,000 blocks and getting the same biome over and over again, you can walk into a portal and find entirely new ones, and then make another portal and find new ones yet. This is a crazy idea, and it's one of the nuttiest core things that will make Reforj great, or make it flop in my opinion. If they can nail this idea down, it will be one of the most interesting things in gaming, but that's one of the fun things about it, right? And that's the challenge they have to deal with, and in the meantime, I get to say, okay, that's really fun, but also I get to say, all of the YouTubers who were up there, we all kind of enjoyed it. Like I said, there were 7 of us, and we were all playing Reforj at separate points, except for Mumbo, who was just to my left the entire time. He was watching intently. He was really enjoying what he was seeing. So at one point, I'm like, you should play this game. And he's like, no, I've never played on a Minecraft on a controller. The only controller game I played is Skate, and it's all the right stick. I'm not going to be good at this. But after a little bit of insisting, he jumped aboard, and like I mentioned, I have this footage for reasons, and I want to show you something, because I don't know necessarily if he's like known for building or anything like that. This isn't my forte, but I suspect that that's not true. But he did approach building with a kind of modern perspective. Everyone else who built in Reforj was kind of just building casually or creatively, but he approached with the idea of like, okay, I'm going to load up a bunch of blocks to make some nice gradients. Okay, I'm going to build and use those, I'm going to use that gradient to make a lovely thing here. And then he made a roof, but instead of just using stairs for the entire thing, he used stairs with a mixture of these weird slope blocks. And I thought this was going to look awful. I was watching this and I was like, this is going to be worse than my deliberately awful dirt birch leafs house. But interestingly enough, as it came together, I was like, oh, this is actually something special. And then he brings out some leaves to make some terrain outside of it. And I was just amazed at what I was seeing. I was like, oh yeah, this is actually, this is like a pretty modern style build. It's not my building preference or anything, but it was something that impressed someone. And at this point, I think Stampy came back in the room and kind of laughed at the idea that like, oh, look at that house you built. And then he scrolls around it and it's like, no, he built one wall of the house. But yeah, this is Mumbo Jumbo's first house inside of it. Don't ask me why I have the footage. I don't quite know either. But I think that might be worth sharing with you in case you want to see someone else's perspective on this game, because I enjoy just goofing off and being creative in the same way that I am when I'm playing regular Minecraft. I did, of course, build a terrible version of the Let's Play house at some point, but it is also fun to see what other people do in these games, and that is where I think 4J is going to have their biggest challenge and their biggest, I guess you could say both challenge and their biggest strength is in seeing that this is a game that will succeed or die on the backs of what people can do with it, off the backs of will people actively enjoy it, and I think that's why they are actively trying to engage with the community nice and early on. They're trying to, not only just by showing, myself and Stampy the engine many months back, not just by showing some YouTubers the earliest possible version of the game right now, but by trying to release an early version to the public, some form of pre-alpha survival test is what they're going to call it, I think. By trying to engage early on, they can see what works and what doesn't, and that is a interesting idea. Is it going to work? Is this the Minecraft strategy, if you will? scale? Is this a good idea? That's the question. I think they were very clear multiple times. They don't expect a success anywhere near the level of Minecraft, but I think it is a good thing for the voxel game ecosystem if there are other games out there which can bring ideas, because ultimately Minecraft has had a monopoly on this idea for a long time, and so they have lots of ideas they get to work, or that they choose to work on, that aren't necessarily the ideas that the community or the fans or the buyers want in that way. And it'd be cool to see how the market changes if this comes around, which, by the way, a lot of people have been saying, like, wow, I can't believe this is going to come up for Hytale. Yeah, 100%. Hytale is still re-gearing their engine, whereas it looks like 4J spent those years from the beginning. They say they've been working in some form since 2019, working on getting that engine right so they can build the game on top of it, rather than building the game on top of an engine that isn't right. And that's a really interesting idea, but I'm very curious to see, and I hope you are too, because this is the end of this video. I hope you found it to be interesting. I thought this was one of the more interesting times, and that's why I spent 3 days up with 4J learning all about it. Hopefully you enjoy this little bit of a dive into it, and if you want to see more Reforj stuff and updates about that game, you can subscribe to this channel, where of course we focus on Minecraft and the updates and everything else like that. Indeed, I think a new video just went up today about that. Go check it out. For now though, thank you for watching, thank you to 4J, and thank you to you for being you. Yeah, keep doing that. You're doing great. Goodbye.